When one of the most powerful spiritual leaders of our era, Bishop T.D. said that he would be leaving, the Christian faith family was in shock. Individuals from around the globe who had attended his ministry, read his books, listened to his sermons, and been moved by his conferences found themselves shocked. It wasn't only that a giant of faith was retiring, there was the question of why. But what intrigued even further was what followed. A voice from the past, a voice that spoke without apology or caution, appeared to speak into the moment. Dr. Juanita Bynum, a force to be reckoned with in her own right, had finally had enough. For all those years she had been quite quiet as far as her relationship with Bishop Jakes was concerned, but now she had a message. And what she divulged was not merely about his exit. It was about all of that had been building up to it, the decades of stress, strain, silence, and reality that had been simmering just below the surface. What she revealed sent shockwaves not just through the Christian sphere, but in broader circles of leadership, faith, and responsibility. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. For decades, Bishop Jakes had been the icon of steadfast spiritual authority. His sermons were passionate and memorable, full of passion that could bring people to tears. His books were sold by the millions, touching lives well beyond the doors of his Dallas, Texas-based church, the Potter's House. His "Woman Thou Art Loosed" conferences became the stuff of legend, attracting women from around the globe and offering them hope, strength, and empowerment. To the general public, Jakes was not just a pastor, he was an icon of American culture, a spiritual patriarch, and, for some, America's pastor. But Juanita Bynum, who knew him as a fellow minister and someone whose ascent to fame was linked directly to his stage, noticed something else. Behind the cameras, the crowded arenas, and the deafening claps, she saw cracks in the foundation, cracks that no one cared to talk about then. It was Bishop Jakes who provided Juanita with her big break when she preached her legendary "No More Sheets" sermon at one of his large conferences. That sermon, uncut and horribly exposed, was a watershed for her. It struck a chord in every woman and propelled her to fame. One night, she was no longer just another preacher, but a household name within the Christian community. The public viewed Jakes and Bynum for years as unified, a vision of two great leaders in harmony, constructing the kingdom of God on a worldwide platform together. But to insiders and those around both of them, there were differences beneath the surface. Jakes was respected for protecting his image closely, being discreet, and controlling the message. Bynum, by contrast, had long been vocal, never shrinking from saying unpopular truths, even if it ruffled feathers. In private discussions, Juanita started expressing unease about what she described as the increasing celebrity culture within the church. She witnessed mega-pastors emulating moguls, congregations giving blindly with no accountability, and conferences that started to resemble more of an entertainment show than a spiritual experience. She was disillusioned by how image was becoming more important than authenticity. Although she never mentioned Jakes by name in those early years, many felt she was referring to him and others such as he who had constructed huge empires on the platform of ministry. It wasn't that she lacked respect for him, she had respect for him. But she also had a duty to speak the truth as she perceived it, and that caused an undercurrent of tension between them. So when Jakes at last made his resignation from active leadership, everyone anticipated that Juanita would release a gracious little message of thanks and best wishes, maybe thanking him for his service to the kingdom. Instead, she took another path. She said truth, or at least her truth. She wasn't filled with gossip, scandal, or sensationalism. They were layered with depth, reflection, and an unmistakable call to question the system that had brought things to this place. Her message was not merely about one man resigning. It was about the culture of ministry that had grown up around him and men like him. Juanita indicated that too many spiritual leaders are placed on pedestals and treated as if they were untouchable idols. The stress of keeping up that image, she cautioned, can ruin not only the leaders themselves but also the integrity of the ministry. People yearn to be inspired. They yearn to be healed, she declared fervently. But what happens when the healing ceases and the image begins? Her words struck a chord because they touched on something everyone had felt but never dared express. She posed the searing question, what do you do when your ministry is more about the brand than the calling? That sentence struck home. For years, Jakes had been pastor and brand, preacher and mogul. His platform reached far beyond Sunday mornings. He was in movies, books, television networks, and conferences. He wasn't just Bishop Jakes anymore, he was an international enterprise. But as Juanita remarked, with that kind of power comes great pressure and great risk. When attention turns from serving to surviving, from loyalty to popularity, something vital is lost. And in her view, Jakes had hit that point of no return. She wasn't talking as a bystander. She lived it. Juanita herself had known the highs of celebrity ministry and the debilitating lows when the spotlight became too weighty. She knew the cost it extracted emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. So when she said that Jakes's stepping down was not merely about exhaustion but about fleeing a ministry that had become a monster, people heard her. Her words created a stark vision, an empire so large it started devouring the man who constructed it. Juanita cautioned that the system was unsustainable. Mega ministries tended to require endless growth, endless visibility, endless expansion. Leaders couldn't ever be weak or vulnerable for fear of losing their credibility. They needed to always be on, always doing, always perfect. That loop, she said, wears people down eventually. And Jakes, while strong and powerful, was nevertheless human. He had finally reached his breaking point. But she didn't stop there. She reported that in addition to the fatigue, there were other agendas at work, politics, rumors, and power plays backstage. In her opinion, even within the church, not everyone had altruistic motives. Some were more concerned with control, influence, or money than with true service. These influences, she contended, had something to do with Jakes's resignation. And perhaps saddest of all, she said, was the understanding that the closest people to you aren't necessarily there for your best. When you succeed, they celebrate you. When you fail, they vanish. The discussion next turned to the subject of legacy. Jakes had constructed something colossal. The Potter's House wasn't a church, it was a phenomenon. His books, his conferences, his TV spots had reached millions. His legacy was undeniable. But Juanita asked the uncomfortable question, what if a legacy is constructed so tightly upon one individual's brand? Can it actually last once that individual moves on? She believed that authentic legacy should not be attached to a personality but to values, principles, and a community that can propel the vision without relying on one person. But still, she confessed, the responsibility of Jakes's legacy was staggering. His resignation impacted not only his own congregation. It cascaded through the whole Christian infrastructure, publishers, media organizations, conference planners, and the scores of ministries that had sprung up or been funded by his visibility. His presence left a void. Who could replace him? Anyone. Juanita indicated that the church itself is evolving. The mega-church paradigm that prevailed through the last few decades is being questioned. Younger generations aren't impressed by gaudy conferences or celebrity pastors. They need authenticity, vulnerability, and genuine connection. The future, she proclaimed, belongs to leaders who will be unafraid to be transparent, who serve rather than put on shows, who prize people over platforms. Jakes was a giant of his generation, but the next generation, she intimated, will look quite different. And as for Jakes himself, Juanita did not think this was the end of his reign. Men like him do not just vanish. Instead, they shift directions. She foresaw that he would rebrand himself, maybe through media, public speaking, or other venues of leadership beyond the pulpit. His tale, she maintained, was far from over. The question was whether his future work would be as significant as his past or if it would be clouded by the same brand he had struggled to build. The bigger question, though, wasn't specifically about Jakes. It was about leadership in the church as a whole. When older leaders recuse themselves, what then? How will the next generation deal with the changing expectations of congregations that no longer desire perfection but authenticity? Juanita called it both challenge and opportunity. The church needs to change. It needs to depart from empire building and move toward healing, growth, and genuine transformation. Leaders need to be taught not to motivate masses but to live honestly, to serve humbly, and to lead openly. Ultimately, Juanita's statement was not a critique of Jakes. It was an awakening to the entire system. She complimented his success, honored his work, but could not get away with sugarcoating the deeper realities. His resignation was not merely a personal choice, it was a reflection of where contemporary ministry stands. It made the world confront tough questions about faith, leadership, and what really counts. So the dust settles, and the Christian world is at a crossroads. Will it follow along the celebrity ministry path, or will it move to a new paradigm based on authenticity and service? The future remains unwritten for Bishop T.D. Jakes. For Juanita Bynum, her voice once again sparks a dialogue many wished to remain buried. And for the church as a whole, this moment isn't only about one leader retiring. It is, as Juanita described it, a reckoning, an opportunity to reform, to look inward, and to get back to the center of what ministry was always supposed to be.